Welcome back to Beagle Eye Visions. We're going to wrap up episode 52, Ancient Freemasonry, of the CubbyWhole podcast with Douglas Martin and Nate Cap. These two are legends. They know their stuff. Trust me. Believe me, these guys absolutely know their stuff. They've read a lot of books. They've they've done a lot of presentations. I'm looking forward to some more in the future, and I'm sure they're going to be pumping out some more work. So let's get some grinding in here. Thank you if you made it this far.
Because I liked what you said about the pandemic, right? Because it's being spread out. And anyway, when I heard about spread out, I also thought of the archetypal devil, as the archetypal devil has two horns. And how I understand the archetypal devil is that the archetypal devil has two horns because it represents being a part in dualism. And this being a part in dualism usually is, or more than likely, is about materialism. Because to be spread out like Pan, to be spread out, to have the poles spread out and not having the pillar of wisdom in the middle where the marriage happens between the two pillars. You don't have this middle, you don't have the erected middle pillar in the archetypal devil, and the archetypal devil is red, which is the base desire color. It's the root chakra color. And the devil is also goat-footed, right? So it's really interesting how this has become a belief of people that something like this actually exists, but really it's just an expression to help us understand ourselves when we're in a materialistic mindset in the aggregate. And I thought that was something really interesting that I caught when you started talking about the spread as Pan.
It's where we get our term demon, because that comes from pandemonium.
Oh, yeah.
So the idea of demonic comes from pandemonium. And there's a lot of there's a lot of things that we want to understand about it. Mostly that what we have is our imaginations run amok with things being stigmatized, and it's all a result of the corruption of the ancient wisdom.
Right.
But ideally, there's a lot of things that are profound about it, and it has to be understood. Like what you were saying, the pillars represent the polarities as widespread as far apart from each other as they can be. You know, the absolute opposite of balance. It's total polarity on either side. It also represents the boundaries of the physical realm,
Right.
where the devil would reign supreme through man's ambition. So first thing we want to make clear is that the idea of the devil is an ideology.
Right.
So, but what we realize that people have literalized these things, and it's this literalization that constitutes our own devolution. So it's the loss of the ancient expression that we are perplexed by. And I want to read you a little bit of church word regarding that. Not trailing clouds of glory, we have come from any state of perfection as fallen angels in disguise, with the trump of attainment all behind us, but as animals emerging from the animals, wearing the skins of animals, uttering the cries of animals, whilst developing our own. And thus the nescient race has traveled along the course of human evolution with the germ of immortal possibilities in it, darkly struggling for the light and a growing sense of the road being uphill, therefore difficult, and not to be made easy like the downward way to nothingness and everlasting death.
Wow.
So our purpose to evolve ourselves and create a higher type is a difficult task. Much more difficult than the downward spiral or the downward path to nothingness and everlasting death.
Right.
Laziness, apathy, and cowardice are the adversary. And those are our spiritual, or time and attention are our spiritual currencies.
Right.
So the idea of taking the easy way out is taking the downward path to nothingness and everlasting death. So,
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, you just think of the gravity being symbolic, because the pavement means base consciousness, right? The porch means base consciousness. And when we're, as I talked about on the last show with the spiral staircase, we are evolving up. We're transcending gravity symbolically. We're moving away from the gravitational base desire pull, the west direction, right, in the first degree tracing board. And we're moving up symbolically into the higher echelons of consciousness towards enlightenment. And it's that, you know, the gravity of our fantasies and base desires are what pulls us back towards the floor, and that's what we resist. We resist those things in order to find our higher self, to discover our higher self. And it's very interesting how gravity works both spiritually in a symbolic way and in a literal way.
yeah, the spiritual is always reaching down to pull the physical up, while the physical is reaching up to pull the spiritual down.
Right, right.
So another way we could say that is the frontal neocortex is reaching down to pull the R complex up, and the R complex is reaching up to pull the neocortex down.
Right.
And what we have to understand is there is no development in frontal neocortex of any significance unless both hemispheres are brought into balance. Now, that's a paradigm. It's a model. We don't have to literalize it, but we can literalize it because the brain is clearly divided in two hemispheres, and 3 tiers.
Right.
So this triune brain model is imperative to understanding the ancient psychology. If you're not comfortable with the right-left paradigm or the triune brain model, then we can just change the terms, because that's a paradigm. It's a model.
Right.
The terms then would be intellectual and intuitive. And those are different qualities. So we have to understand the idea that Jesus spoke in parables is not, he's trying to riddle you into confusion. It's that you simply cannot learn to decode sublime information until you fully activate unused parts of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing in our Western education is addressing those areas of the brain. In fact, most of the programs are working and endeavoring to phase out the arts. So the idea of Jesus speaking in parables is knowing that the intuitive aspects of the brain have to be activated.
That's right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's even just like green language. There really is no way to understand green language until you are finding balance within. And there's a lot of people that will dismiss green language, but yet still use wordplay and puns and say it all the time. And the reason that they can do that is because there's a part of their brain that's activated that allows them to see what words are actually saying. But then there's this part of their logical skepticism brain that's saying, well, there's nothing to this at all. But see, then it comes to, what if you don't have an understanding of morality? Because morality is the key here when it comes to this middle language. And if we don't have morality, if we don't have an understanding of morality, then we aren't finding that middle place. We're not the middle frequency is not lighting up, and we are not in a alchemical wedding, if you will, right? So it's all about the balance. It's about the equilibrium.
That's correct. And everything the ancient Egyptians are endeavoring to do is achieve that balance on a spiritual plane, because they understand that that's the only way it can manifest in the physical plane.
Right.
And that is not understood in the modern world. So throwing out green language with the bathwater is a big mistake, because that is restricting the possibility of your brain faculty from being able to decode more information from something that becomes apparently exhaustible or mundane. And
Exactly.
for instance, each letter of a word is a symbol in and of itself. And we can say the letter A is a blade, and that's a masculine prospect. And the letter E typifies the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn and the equator. And it stands for equilibrium or equator. So we have to understand that everything that the Egyptians endeavored to do was to bring that universal balance. And that didn't just apply to the physical terrestrial Earth. The idea was that if we attain the balance on the terrestrial Earth, that will order balance throughout the entire universe. That's the idea. So that starts on an internal level. And it's very profound when we look at the ancient tribes, because here's the deal. This is something that needs to be brought right into the light, and I'm going to try to do it right now. The ancient tribes in Egypt, when they did their ceremonies, they set up both pillars. And those pillars represent the South Pole and the North Pole, with the Southern Hemisphere representing the spiritual realm and the Northern Hemisphere representing the terrestrial physical realm. So it's very important to understand that when that moved into the north, that is the schism, because that kind of flipped the original mythos entirely on its head. So one way you could say that is the god of the North Pole deposed the god of the South Pole. And the danger of that is the North Pole is associated with masculine, and that's a physical prospect. So the idea of westing or primacy in the north is a masculine imbalance, a tendency to dominate the feminine, or the physical to dominate the spiritual. So that's what all of that is about. But let me start over. So the tribes in Africa, when they did their ceremonies, they always erected both pillars. Here's the interesting part. In the solar mythos, those were chained to constellations east to west and west to east. And then the deity known as Horus would typify the rising sun to high noon, or the day sky, or spring equinox to summer solstice. And then Set would represent fall equinox to winter solstice, or the night sky, the night realm. So in that respect, the golden falcon became the zoo type to typify Horus as the rising sun, making his flight across the sky. And then the journey through the underworld at that point would be typified by the black bird, or the crow, or raven. Okay, so if we look at the Australian Aborigines, here's the interesting part. The Aborigines have two tribes. One is in the south and one is in the north. And when they do their rituals, each tribe only erects one pillar, because the southern tribe has one pillar, which is denoted by they don't have the black bird and the golden hawk. So the southern pillar is typified by the black cockatiel. And then the northern tribe has the other pillar that's typified by the white cockatiel. So here we have the Egyptian ritual in Australia. And more importantly, we have the foundations of Freemasonry.
Right.
So this is the kind of antiquity that we're talking about when we talk about Freemasonry. And that the term Freemasonry is confusing, because that's not the term that would apply. This is the Egyptian craft. But this is what emerged, or the lodge systems known as Freemasonry had managed to preserve and recover and bring into the modern world to make accessible for us today, whereas otherwise I say we would not have it without the function of the secret societies through antiquity. That Rome had packaged and labeled the exoteric and went to war on the esoteric and the secret societies. So we have to understand that definitely demonstrates that what we find in Australia in the Australian hieroglyphs is purely Egyptian. And more importantly, what we know as the foundations of the tradition known as Freemasonry. So go ahead.
You were talking about something that I just was thinking about when you were talking about the white bird in the Aborigines, or with the Aborigines, and it reminded me of when you were telling me about the allegory of the white bat in Ace Ventura, When Nature Calls, when they're in Australia. So I was wondering if you could.
I didn't know that took place in Australia.
Oh, I thought it did, because maybe it didn't. No, I'm thinking of the guys.
I'm not sure that they really specified where that was supposed to be taking place.
Right.
Maybe New Guinea or.
Yeah, I don't think it's Australia. I was thinking of the guys who took the blow dart and hit him in the neck, who kidnapped him. They were Australian, right?
I think that they were archetypally typifying Aboriginal tribes that would correspond to New Guinea tribes or Australia, but I'm not sure that they ever really specified which tribes those were supposed to be, or that there was anything authentic exactly about those tribes. I think it was partly archetypal, but yes, it did invoke the Australian Aborigines or possibly the New Guinea Aborigines, but I'm glad you brought that up because that is the perfect example of what Julius Caesar did to master this art of divide and conquer. So what takes place in that movie is you have venture capitalists, industrialists wanting to industrialize and exploit the resources of that land, but they can't do so as long as those tribes are occupying that land. So the plan is to get those tribes to war with each other and then kill each other off so they can take over their land. And they do that by taking their sacred zoo type, which in this case was typified by the white bat and the black bat. And it means the same thing in that respect that the white cockatiel and the black cockatiel would mean in the Aborigine tradition of Australia. So it's a great example of how divide and conquer actually works. And it shows you. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up because that is a great example. Both those movies have a lot of esotericism in it.
Oh, for sure.
But it's the second movie that I think is very profound because it helps us understand early Freemason. That these two tribes represented, if we understand the Aboriginal tradition, we will understand that's Freemasonry. And one more thing I want to say about the Aboriginals of Australia that demonstrates a superiority to modern humans is that they do not practice socialism. We are primitive by comparison in our ideology.
Right.
So we mock what we don't understand.
Right. You were kind of touching on spirit earlier, and invoking spirit. That was something that I talked about in the last show, invoking the spirit as far as numbers. How do numbers invoke the spirit? And that's something that you have definitely talked about in the past that I think you do a really good job of breaking that down. And that was something in the last show in the middle, or the winding staircase, you have the 3, the 5, and the 7. And I'm wondering if you'd like to talk about what does it mean to invoke the spirit within numbers?
I'm thinking of that image of the tracing board that demonstrates all 3 sets of stairs, and we noticed in that image that they had the trivium out of order.
Right.
Let's just go ahead and clarify. First of all, the trivium in its purest form is Freemasonry. So entered, past, raised is the equivalent of grammar, logic, rhetoric, or knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. So the middle chamber is where we are learning to work with and apply the knowledge from the entered degree. And then the master degree or the raised degree is wisdom. It's the output. It's the accomplishment. It's the triumph over materialism. It's right action in the world. That's very significant because most important thing about understanding the numerology is to focus on the single digits. Understand that there was earlier number systems that were based on the lower numbers because the numbers were discovered chronologically ordered. So we discovered the 1 before we had the 2, but we could never understand the 1 without the 2. And that's a discussion that will be ongoing. So in order for the 1 to understand itself, it divides into 2, and that's where we get the 3. And this corresponds directly to the ideas of these polarities and these pillars. So those are the most significant numbers. Ideally, 1 is the singularity, so that is the supreme. Everything else is a function of the 1, or a part, an accessory part of the 1. And with the odd numbers invoking the spiritual realm, the even numbers are going to typify the physical realm conversely. So that's very important, because understanding that the 4 represents the physical plane. So when we deal with the 4 directions or the 4 seasons or the 4 divisions of the zodiac, we want to associate that with the cardinal points, which are typified in the pyramids and typified in the ship wheel, and then the Sabbats typifying the semi-cardinal points. So in order to understand the semi-cardinal points, we have to first understand the primaries, which are the cardinal points. Winter solstice, spring equinox, summer solstice, fall equinox are the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, with pale horse as summer solstice. That's where sun begins to lose power. The beginning of waning angles is pale horse. And then, of course, black horse would be winter solstice, and red horse would be fall equinox, and white horse would be spring equinox. So the 4 is the most profound way to understand the correspondence of the physical to the even number. For instance, 4-legged animals, an elephant may have been seen as the body representing the earth, and then the 4 pillars holding up the earth. That's just an example. But it was the 4 that would be significant there, because it's typifying the physical realm. And the idea of the Trinity, it's our source spiritual concept. So the original Trinity is Horus, Sut, and Shu. And that's purely Egyptian. And we will find corrupted forms of it. But main thing I'm saying is that's the original. And
Got it.
the fact that it's an odd number denotes a spiritual prospect. You know, I may not be able to fully explain that, because there's a lot of things I want to talk about, but let me just say this. The most important thing to understand, or what this reveals to us, is how to discern the greater mysteries from the lesser mysteries, and understand that everything that happened in the earliest civilization, which was stellar, was dealing with that number 7. So it's a safe assumption that there was a number system based on that 7, and that every number before the 7 had been discovered before we arrived at the 7. So the 5 had a special significance. The Trinity gave us the 3. The 5 was given to us by the family of Osiris, but that happened in the stellar phase. So that corresponded to the 5 extra days of a 365-day year. So that was seen as a 360-degree circle with 5 mysterious days added, and those days reserved for venerating those 5 mysterious spirits or divinities, which typify one divinity in 5 aspects. But the point is, the family of Osiris did exist in stellar, but that's where our 5 is derived from. I would say that's the most profound significance of it. The idea in alchemy, with spirit raised and driven inversely into the ground, I mostly associate that with alchemy or Neoplatonism, but I would say the concept is far older. But see, main thing is the ancient cultures would have been endeavoring to preserve the original ideas. So the concern would always be new ideas obscuring source ideas. And then the 7 is derived from the transition of the 6 between the 5 and the 7. So we can't really understand any of these things without understanding the chronological significance of each new discovery. And that's part of it. But the main thing I wanted to say is that, you know, in the musical scale, the 7 represented the completion of the scale. So that's constitutes achievement. And then 6 would constitute failure because it was failure to reach the highest rung of the ladder, so to speak. So, but the idea is that the scale starts over in the octave in a 7-tone scale. So the 8 is the 1. And the irony is the 1 is an odd number. So now the 8 prospectively is an odd number, and then each number succeeding that correspondingly. So the 9 is even, 10 is odd, etc. It gets confusing.
Right.
And the reason I would say that part of that, we also have to remember that the 7 typifies the stellar mythos, and that the 12 ultimately typifies the solar phase, which came later. But in the musical scale, the 12 is the totality of all of the notes in the octave, and the 7 is the pure scale, the harmony in the octave. Those are the harmonics, and that those harmonics order the universe. So our planetary ecliptics are harmonic belts of the frequency of the sun. So our planets orbit the sun in the harmonic belts of its own frequency, including the asteroid belt. So that's in a harmonic frequency. And but in the greater mysteries, just remember the 13 is the 1 because the octave ends with the 12. So the 13 has the special significance as the 1 also. But the main thing is to understand that most of what the stellar priest class would have been concerned about is going into the greater mysteries and wielding domination, or the potential to wield power over nature. So the idea is, in the stellar mythos, they had discovered these forces in nature, but in the greater mysteries, we had the possibility to harness these forces in nature. And, I was trying to say earlier, so I'm just going to go ahead and throw it in here. Just remember, one thing that leads us into materialism is the need for utility. So the more we stray from our natural habitat, which is roughly not more than 15 degrees north or south of the equator, increases our need for utility. So the more we go into a hostile region of the north, we can't plant crops year-round, so that forces us into carnism. We can't survive without clothing or fire or shelter, and that forces us into the need for utility, which forces us to take more resources.
Right.
So the whole idea is you're not going to achieve perfection in the physical world, but the idea is to give back everything that you take and try to strike this balance and minimize your impact. And that's an individual responsibility that we are supposed to be taught by the elders. Of course, we're taught the exact opposite, that we need to exploit every resource, and that every resource on this planet and everything that's on this planet is a resource for us to use for our own materialistic ambition.
Very well said.
I'm just kind of reviewing in my mind what we just discussed, because it seems like there was something else that you said that I didn't fully answer.
Well, I was talking about evoking the spirit within the odd numbers, and I feel like you did pretty well.
Well, the main thing is that just let's keep in mind that just like in the alphabet, the vowels invoke the spirit.
Right.
There's 7.
Right.
A, E, I, O, U, W, and Y.
Right.
So that's part of the significance of the 7. But also in the number system, or the numerology, it's the odd numbers that invoke the spirit. But we have to understand there's a cutoff point. That's at the number 7. So it's the odd numbers up to 7 invoke the spirit, and everything after 7, we have to be in equilibrium. If we're working with anything in the greater mysteries and we're not in equilibrium, well,
I need to be a lot more high
circumstances
roll.
to error because they became human beings. But that didn't just happen deliberately. That happened through neglect,
A
constraint.
lot more drunk to be bothered.
So I would tell you that the pyramid, the project of building the pyramids was the contingency for that.
Travis Lonely Man, coming to you with another important
Mythos
news
was
story,
coming,
folks.
and that would be followed
See,
by
fighting in the Commonwealth.
They fully understood what
We put on some wonderful radio.
so everything that they did.
You should listen
I
sometime.
think the most important thing to understand about the building of the pyramids is that it is a contingency for going to privacy and the north. The original mythology was based on the southern realm, and then all transferred and stored in the northern constellation. So that
Humanity has fallen so since the bomb.
I don't ask for much. Just need a full bottle and some bones to break.
everything is the opposite or the inverse principle.
Feeding
got a
nostalgic
thing
or
for
something.
antiques, huh?
Could always get some
That's
cash for
what
that, I
this
suppose.
amounts to. That's part of the reason that we can't understand or see through it because we don't understand that the entire spiritual realm there's been a whole shit of us in the spiritual realm, right? Not the physical realm, right?
It's, and if you don't have the understanding of the principle of correspondence, it's impossible to understand that science. And it is really, it's already so complicated. It's always complicated because of how far back it goes, but then to see how something can be southern, but then also mean eastern, or when something goes from south to north, like an ideology or a belief system, and then stays there for thousands of years.
Would you like me to go
You
here?
don't understand how that works. You don't understand, like we don't understand how the hemispheres of the earth correspond to the hemispheres of the mind, of the brain. And then we think of east and west as our right and left, but then we don't really think of our north and south as our left and right. Because
That's correct.
we've been
That's very
conditioned,
important because the north and south are the primary.
right?
Those are the boundaries.
Right.
And the southern is the spiritual realm. And the northern was this. So they go into the solar phase. That corresponds to the west and east. So the north becomes the western prospect, the west becomes the northern prospect, the east becomes the southern prospect, so the west becomes the physical prospect, and the east becomes the spiritual prospect.
Right.
And we have to understand that that's our three-dimensional world. And that's what this form is typified as cardinal points. So, yeah, that's part of the confusion, so there's no question about that. And I think that you've explained it well there, and I'm glad you brought it up. But yeah, the reason that that's confusing is that's part of the reason that I put the emphasis on recovering the lost
Humanity
history
is
of
so
knowledge.
resilient. To
Because
cling
if we
to
don't
life
understand the
despite all
ideas of
of
pure
this.
forms, then we don't understand, first of all, what was significant about it. Second of all, the danger of those becoming corrupt.
Right. Yeah, it's so amazing how. See, and that's what I'm really trying to express with these tracing boards. Is they're made.
Can't wait to get out of this goddamn heat. What gave you the idea we're friends?
3 degrees expressed with the Leonard Apprentice, the photographed master mason degree tracing boards. And I really feel like that first degree tracing board is so strong, has so much in it, and it really does help us
The incredible data
understand
is back.
these sciences ships out into space, we are running away from where we should be. Yeah, we're running away from truth, and we're running away from where we really need to go, which is up in consciousness, in the self. So that's what the tracing board is saying. We're supposed to be going, well, in the tracing board, it's about going east, right? Because it's about going to the rising sun. It's about going to light, becoming enlightened, and raising yourself. And instead of raising ourselves in consciousness, we're raising ourselves off the earth in a spaceship to who knows where.
Instead of a spiritual racing, we have a physical racing.
Yeah, and I'm not against the exploration of space at all, but where we're collectively putting all of our time and attention to is definitely not into the self. It's definitely not into these crazy, government funded, rocket space programs.
Yeah, I mean, the way you said it, we're going outwardly instead of inwardly. I think that clearly defines the problem. So I've pretty much covered everything I wanted to cover. I can cover a lot of it in a lot more detail. So I'll look forward to coming back on, maybe solo those a few shows and getting all three of us on here.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I think we're gonna try to do that this December. We shall see. Well, I really appreciate you doing the show, and
Perfect.
we have definitely covered a lot of really heady topics, very important topics. One thing I wanted to say also is, if you are wanting to know any more of Douglas Martin's work, then you can go to the CubbyWhole website, and you'll find more of his work under Douglas. Yeah, so more shows, presentations, and news can be found at CubbyWhole.com. And also, please definitely make sure to not miss the next shows, where I'll be going further into esoteric Freemasonry, especially in regards to the Fellowcraft and the Middle Chamber, especially. So, I hope this was an inspiring and very thought-provoking episode for you guys. And if you have any questions regarding any of the topics for these shows, make sure to email me at cubbyhole@mail.com. That's cubbyhole@mail.com. Also, any donations are always appreciated, as any funds that are donated go directly to the CubbyWhole website and the upkeep of the website. So just hit the donation button on the website at the top, and it's pretty easy to navigate from that point. So, and thanks again to those who have donated so far. Okay, I'm your host, Nate Cap. Thank you so much for listening, and keep in mind to do no harm, defend truth, and keep transcending dogma.
Okay, thanks again if you made it this far. Stay tuned for episode 53 of the CubbyWhole podcast. Not sure which video game I'll be grinding there. I am feeling I'm definitely going to switch it up. Definitely going to switch it up. Or, I don't know. I do have to watch more of the Fallout TV show for this Sunday. I will be doing the allegory of the Fallout TV show on the Crazy Life Story podcast. You can find it on Spotify. It's very easy to find, Crazy Life Story. I'll try to get Matt Bennett to name the episode that we're doing, entitle the episode The Allegory of Fallout. And Squirt Dog has to go potty. He has to go outside, so that's it. Thank you again if you made it this far. You're an absolute legend. Support CubbyWhole Podcast. If you want to support the channel, use code BeagleEyeVision at w.gg. Get yourself some sugar-free game fuel. I'm going to take Squirt Dog. Be sure to stay tuned and stay golden.